Good evening.
This conference will now be recorded.
Today is July 27th, and you are watching the Norwood Finance Commission on Norwood Community Media. Our meeting is virtual. It is live tonight. This is an open meeting. Those who wish to access this meeting can do so through the posting of this meeting on the town's website under calendar. I'll proceed with a roll call of attendees. Judith Langone.
Here.
Kelly Newmy.
Here.
Alan Slater.
Here.
Robert Donnelly.
Here.
And myself, Ann Haley, all present. If there's anyone else in attendance, please identify yourself for our records.
Or good.
Thank you.
Tom McQuaid.
Thank you.
Emily Chambers.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else at this time. But again, a few housekeeping reminders. Keep your microphones on mute while others are talking. Raise your hand to speak, and all our votes will be on roll call, okay? This could be a very short meeting, or it could be a very long meeting. We're going to start with our agenda tonight, the acceptance of the minutes from July 15th. Does anyone want to make a motion on that? Alan Slater?
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none. Judith? Judy?
Yes.
I'll put it to a vote.
I will. I vote yes.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yep. Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Okay. So that brings us to our second piece on the agenda, and that's a discussion of revenues and the 2021 budget. Before we get into that, I wanted to make a kind of an announcement. There was an article in the Norwood Record this past week, and it said FinCom considers future COVID-19 consequences. And yes, we did do that, but I also wanted to make sure that people understood that we had a visitor to our meeting, and that was Representative John Rogers. He very kindly attended our meeting and gave us a lot of very good information. So even though he hadn't been recognized in the newspaper, I thought it would be good if I brought it up now. So again, our thanks to Representative Rogers for coming well prepared and giving us some good information. Okay, that said,
And
yes.
I think that meeting has also been replayed on cable. So if
Okay.
anybody's interested in really hearing the details of what John had to say, check your listing on cable and you'll see it replayed.
Thank you. Okay. So, yeah, there was really a lot of good information on that in that meeting. So, Mr. McQuaid, did I see you with a spreadsheet of sorts here? Would you like to begin with that?
If I can find it, I will. All right. So threw this together this afternoon. We're not even near the end of doing the accounting for the fiscal year that just ended. But so these are the preliminary numbers I have. So basically, if I just go down for the major variances, so motor vehicle excise tax was short by $285,000 from our the amount we carried in the budget. Rentals in general were up $269,000. Some of this is because I think the categories changed a little on how we report, but unfortunately, cemetery revenue is up, and that's due to the extra deaths that we've incurred in the town. And recreation department revenue is down $75,000, mainly because a lot of programs needed to be canceled. But overall revenue, which is permits, licenses, fees, and other departmental revenue, so that's actually 200,000 more than our budget. Investment income is also up 143,000. Our meals tax, believe it or not, is over by 161,000, and our room tax, excise tax, is down by 488,000. So collectively, we're actually right on target with of a $23,000 variance on the departmental receipts. The second section is utilities. Water was just a little bit short, $71,000. Electric and broadband look like there's a big problem, but actually there's not, because I know the finance commissioners know that because we have to be able to purchase the power, and if that spikes up in cost during the year, so the light department puts in a lot of extra padding on the expense side and then raises the revenue budget by the same amount. So what I did down below is to show you that the light department's actually turning back budgets of $9,742,000. The revenue is down $5,242,000 from the forecast, but the net is it's actually to the better by $4.5 million. And broadband also does the same thing with production costs, but they're even $128,000 better. So both of those numbers will really help free cash.
Alan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom, I'm curious, I went back to the FY21 budget book, where we looked at all the revenues from our department receipts, and I'm looking at, I guess it's the information, page 24.
On the
And for the
2020
most
budget,
part,
this is the 20
the forecasts that you used were consistent with that, but in a couple of cases they weren't. I mean, as an example, in that document, the meals tax was estimated at $842,155. So,
Alan, could you stop for a minute?
sure,
Did you say you were looking at the fiscal 21?
I am looking at the fiscal 21 budget book,
Okay,
the
but
one that's handed out at town meeting.
these numbers are fiscal 2020.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the estimated 2020 numbers.
I'm sorry, Alan, one more minute. What page are you on?
Okay, this is our budget recommendations, fiscal 21 from the Finance Commission. It's what's handed out at town meeting to all town meeting members. I'm on info page 24.
Okay,
Thank
hold
you.
on. Let us catch up for a minute.
Everybody ready?
Okay, I'm with you. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, the bottom line doesn't change, but some of the numbers there for estimated estimated 2020 were different than in the spreadsheet you have here. I mean, I'll use as an example the meals tax. It was the estimated 2020 meals tax we had was $842,155. Okay, so if you look at the actual, it would mean that our meals tax, there was a variance of around $140,000 in the red, which to me makes perfect sense. I can't see how we're able to get a positive variance on a meals tax, given the fact that the last 4 months of the year, many of the restaurants either weren't open at all or were only able to do takeout. So, and there are a couple other instances also where some of those numbers were a little bit different. Again, the bottom line didn't change at all. The total bottom line of department receipts didn't change, but just some of the individual numbers were a little bit different. And, again, particularly in the meals tax, it just didn't make much logical sense to me that you're going to have a positive variance in meals tax, given everything that happened this year.
Yes, Mr. McQuaid.
Okay, so this spreadsheet I have compares what we had in the fiscal 2020 budget versus what we actually received. The thing you're looking at in fiscal 21 was halfway through the year, us guessing what we thought we might actually have. But what we have to beat every year is the budget.
Well, again, I'm, looking at meals tax as an example. You had a forecast in this document of this spreadsheet of $538,000 and some change. Going back to FY 17, 18, 19, 20, et cetera, the excise tax for meals was always in the range of $700,000 to $800,000. So I just don't see how we had a forecast of $538,000 for meal tax. It just doesn't represent, what we've had, over the years. And again, to have a positive variance in meals tax just doesn't seem logical to me, given everything that's happened.
All right, so you may recall the way we do budgeting is we take the actuals from the 2 years previous, and then we try to apply a factor. This year, we used 90%.
Right,
In fiscal
okay.
20, we used 92% or something. So we're trying to, be conservative in our budgets. So that's what we did. We happened to beat that forecast by 161,000.
Again, Tom, I mean, I'm not going to belabor the point, but I just don't see the numbers. Maybe we can talk offline about this. But the numbers, several of the numbers were different. Most of the numbers were the same as what I saw on this page.
You're looking at the wrong book, Mr. Slater. You have to look at the fiscal 2020 budget.
Okay.
Fiscal 2020 budget, I have it here. And
Is there a difference between the forecast and budget? Is that what we're saying?
No, but usually when you talk about revenues, you're talking about a forecast.
So it's the forecast that we budgeted for revenues for 2020.
But I have it right here. It's overview page 4, fiscal 2020 budget. I don't know if you can see this if I hold it up. But the number is $538,000. That's what we have in the budget. So I'm comparing what we have in the budget to what we have in actuality. So we beat it. Now, we use conservative numbers in the budget.
Well, again, I mean, I think, as I said, Tom, we'll talk about this offline, but what I'm looking at, has a totally different number. And I just don't see how we can have a positive meals tax this year. It just can't happen. But
You are looking at, you are looking,
Hold on, one person at a time, please. Okay, 1 second. Let me have Mr. Donnelly pop in here and maybe he can figure out a way to explain this to all parties. Yes, Mr. Donnelly.
I don't know if I can, but I think what we're looking at is, I think it's a confusion between the word forecast and budget. So what I hear Tom saying is what we're referencing in the column FY 2020 forecast is actually the FY 2020 budget, which reflects whatever money we anticipated in FY 20 for meals tax. And I'm going to assume from Alan's pointing out info page 24, that, yeah, Alan is right. I mean, there is an estimated 2020 revenue for meals excise tax of 842,000. And I guess that was probably, if I'm hearing this right, an estimate that was probably made early in the year, maybe December, January, as we're building our forecast. But obviously, things have certainly changed in the restaurant business since then. So I think maybe the confusion would be lessened if we just considered that column instead of FY 2020 forecast, it'd be FY 2020 budget. That's what we hit. That's what we put in the budget documents to base our revenues, actual revenue on.
Okay, so you want me to change it to budget?
It would seem to me that that when we're talking about that number 538,389.
Well, the only reason I use forecast as a term is when budgets are for expenses, forecasts are for predicting revenues. Some people call them both budgets. I don't care. This was the fiscal 2020 budget forecast.
So this was made, the numbers from this paper were decided upon in
Preparation of the fiscal 2020 budget.
in 2019,
Yeah, a year and a half ago.
year and a half ago. Okay, so these numbers are from a year and a half ago. If we,
This is what we always compare to, right?
okay. Alan,
So during fiscal 2020, early in the year, we were experiencing really good numbers in those categories. So we made an estimate of how much we thought it would be by the end of the year. And by the end of the year, things changed, right? In March, April, May, and June, they went down a lot. So that estimate was no longer good. But I'm just pointing out, we still have more than we had in the original budget. And overall, we have $24,000 more than we had in the original budget. So if you're trying to look at this in terms of how's it going to affect us generating free cash, that's kind of a break even. What's going to help us on the free cash is the net number down below on these numbers here, $4.5 million. So that's going to be a positive on the net cash, on the free cash calculation.
okay, Judy, do you have your hand up?
Yeah. So the numbers that you have here on this sheet is forecast, is a year and a half old. You updated it around January and of course they changed. So why are we using it here right now and not the updated forecast?
Why would you do that? Don't you want to know how we're doing versus our budget? This is how we're
Well-
doing. This is how we're doing during up versus our budget.
Our
I think
2020,
this kind of misleads people. I think that's what Alan's getting to.
Okay, hold on. I'll go back to the original. I'll change the title on it.
okay, hold on one second. Kelly and then Bob, they both have, do you have a statement or a question?
I have a statement. I think what the confusion is that what Tom is doing is comparing. So there's a difference between what you forecast and what you commit to. So the committed budget is what Tom was showing us right there. That's what we committed to a year and a half ago. Throughout the year, we update our budget forecast based on how the economy is doing and what those trends are. So in January, we forecasted a higher level of revenue than what we had budgeted for, which means we would have had a $250,000 surplus or whatever that difference is. However, with COVID, that's gone away. That revenue was never committed to anybody. It was that we've always stayed with this committed budget. This is what we've committed to. That was just a forecast that was done throughout the year to say that we were ahead of schedule, which is normal to do. I understand that the wording is confusing, and I agree with Judy that it is a little bit misleading, and with Alan as well. But I think that's what the difference is. I think we need to be very clear about that, though, because you're presenting two different numbers with the same exact title, and people aren't going to understand what the difference is. They're just going to think there's data inaccuracies throughout the document because they're.
All right, if you look at the screen, I changed the word from forecast to budget.
Alan,
I think,
does that jive from what your thought process was?
Again,
Okay.
Judy,
You'd rather talk offline later? And,
I'd like to talk offline. I mean, the important
Okay.
point is that we had a slightly positive variance, which is what's most critical. I can talk offline to Tom and we could resolve this pretty quickly, I think.
okay,
excuse me, folks. I think that Kelly stated it well. I think that if we do need to be careful about how we identify things. And so that there might be a little caveat up top here on the difference between what we budgeted and what we in reality saw happen when we adjusted our budget at the start of 2020 or in the fall of 2020 of the 2020 budget. So, okay, we're all set. Can we move on? Okay. So in your Mr. McQuaid, you're saying that, yes, we did see some things go down, but in your opinion that we don't have a net loss?
Oh, right, for fiscal 20, we're right on target for the revenue. And just in these two items alone, we're turning back $4.6 million of budgets between the light department and broadband. We don't know what the rest of the accounting is yet.
Okay. Judy first and then Bob.
yeah. Tom, since we actually don't know every year in the purchase of power, we try to come as close, but we over budget. So that's what that money is. That's really over budgeted money because we didn't have to spend it.
Right, just like it's over budgeted revenue.
Right. So if we didn't do that and we were on target, we would be in trouble.
No, well,
Meaning
No,
that money is not there to then pull right into our own regular town budget.
no, like let's assume the number Mr. Collins added was $5 million to the revenue
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah,
We would have been short $242,000 of revenue, but he would have had a budget that was $5 million less than this number too. And he would still have beaten his budget by $4.5 million.
right. So some of the future that we've been informed of is to have a separate enterprise fund, and that will take that confusion out of it. It will be counted differently, separated.
I
And
think
if there
that's-
isn't,
I think eventually they're going to be an enterprise fund.
right,
Okay.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Donnelly, did you have something?
Yes, Tom, this is just looking for observations. So water and sewer and electric for FY20, but now we're in FY21. What is the anticipated impact to revenue from the loss, of Norwood Hospital? I assume that they're a pretty big electric user, a big user of water and sewer. Any discussions regarding the impact of that on that revenue?
I have not heard.
there's also, isn't there a huge tax potential? Not collecting as much.
Right. I just want to point out, though, we started this year, fiscal 21,
Yeah,
approximately 90% of what we thought we were going to collect in revenue. That's what's in the budget for fiscal 21. Then on top of that, you identified $3 million worth of items that we're not going to spend in the budget till at least we have a further discussion in December. So a combination of those two things is a pretty good cushion, I believe.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Donley.
The reason I'm asking is, and we, you know, it doesn't have, we don't have to talk about it much today, but if we're losing revenue on the from the Norwood Hospital on the water and sewer and electric use, I mean, that is going to have an impact in terms of what we budgeted for the light department, and it's drawing in less revenue. Then it's something for us to watch, because if we are not having the revenue that we anticipated from light and from sewer, you know, that may have an impact on rates. And it certainly might have an impact on use of free cash to cover any under anticipated revenues from those sources. So just something I think as we go forward into the fall, just another thing for the FinCom to just keep our eye on. That's my suggestion.
Okay. We'll make a note of that, Bob. Thank you. All right. Yes, Kelly. Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry about that. So I guess the question I have is, I get all of it. I get, you know, they had a budget, costs came in lower. Can you explain why? Why were we so low on budget? Like, why did that happen? Why do we
Wait.
have an extra $9 million?
Well,
Do we have like
You're
fewer
talking about the light-
people
you're talking
flushing the
about
toilet? Like, what's going on here?
you're talking about the light department?
Yeah, like, why is that? Why is there such a big give back that year? Why are we so off budget?
You'd have to ask Mr. Collins.
May I?
Yeah.
Don't we usually from a historical perspective book a large amount of purchase expense for power? My recollection is that there is some intention to booking a large number for the purchase of power, and that historically, I have to go back and look, but historically we tend not to utilize the total amount of expense for purchase of power. I think that just provides us with more flexibility, bottom line, in our budgeting. That's at least my recollection. But
Bob, I recall that too, but it's usually in the $5 million range, not 10. That's what I'm noticing a difference. It's usually about 5 million from what I recall. This is 9.7 million, which is really, really high. So that's why I was wondering why that turn back is so high when normally it's half of that.
mhm.
I don't know the specific. All I know is that Jim said that, you know, on average, the light department produces $4 million a year, and some years they produce more, and some years they produce less. And this happened to be a really good year.
Okay.
Is there someone who can take that offline to get an answer to it? Because it's double. It's not more. It's double. Something just doesn't seem right there.
Okay, I'm going to suggest, Mr. McQuaid, could you, for the committee, request from Jimmy Collins to explain that a little bit for us and send us out an email?
Will do.
Thank you. All right, Bob, you had your hand up.
No, I'm all set. Thanks.
Okay, doke. All right. So we have this this page that talks to us about what has just happened in 2020 compared to what we thought a year and a half ago. When we budgeted our budget when we started our budget for 2021 in January, we also thought that these revenues would come in very high and everything was going to be wonderful. Now we do know that we have had some downward trends, and the state has had some downward trends, and that's why we're here tonight. Correct? Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So now we have to talk about, okay. First of all, I'm going to start this with some questions, and maybe Mark Good can answer them for us, being the treasurer. I think it's sort of more his area of expertise. And if I'm wrong, I'm sure Mr. McQuaid will have an answer. Okay, So we are now in July. We're almost at the end of July. Have we had any income from the state? And when do we get income from the state in the way of state aid? When does that happen under this 1/12 budget?
So
Yes,
the July local aid payment will be distributed July 31. The Department of Revenue has contacted us and let us know that that local aid will be based on the 2020 local aid. Since since the state hasn't passed the budget, they're just going to base it on what we received monthly in 2020. The same is true of the assessments. They'll assess us the same amount that was assessed in 2020.
Thank you. So they took the whole year of what they gave us and are basically splitting it down into 12 evenly distributed local aid distributions.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. I'm gonna have to mute for 1 second here.
I'm sorry.
Okay, Judy.
Yeah, so again, this is what we've been told, that the state's on a 1/12 budget, probably at least 2 to 3 months. So we're not sure what we'll be getting, except maybe 1/12 of what we got last year, which is probably lower. And I think John Rogers went into some detail on that, and also the uncertainty behind it. I mean, this kind of scares me a bit. Coming out of the chute. And we have a budget that was built on a pre-virus budget, which we were very proud of. We thought we had the money, and here we are. So I'm really a bit uncomfortable with what's going on, but I'm sure everybody else is too.
Okay. Ms. McQuaid, did you want to say something, or you just? Mr. Donnelly?
What's the question?
No, I guess there wasn't one. Mr. Donnelly?
Yeah, Judy makes a good point. I do think, though, that in preparing for this budget and the actions that the commission took and presented to the town meeting, I mean, we did this with the knowledge that state aid and even our local receipts were the estimates were questionable given our situation. I think, when I looked at, I just looked at the budget document once again just to refresh my memory in terms of what we did. We did do a lot to account for the potential of local aid to be in jeopardy. So just as a reminder for folks, we revised our spending. We did a lot of things. I mean, Tom can go through the list as well, but we froze the use of free cash for our capital outlay and delayed capital outlay for the fall meeting. When it goes forward, it's borrowing. That freed up free cash. We put a pause on, more than $1.5 million, I think, on pausing pension contributions, the stabilization fund contribution, the override contribution. We preserved a lot of free cash to help us through bumps in the road. It's certainly not comfortable, but I think we planned pretty well for this. And if it's a matter of, having the having faith that we did plan well, and that should take us through July, August, September. I feel we have done that. So I'm glad to see that we are receiving at least the 1/12 level of local aid from the state. I mean, I think a local aid in total for FY21 was about $1.5 million more. So on a 1/12 basis, quick calculation is that's probably hitting us at maybe over $100,000 left in state aid on the 1/12 budget. But I think we've done a good job pausing our spending and revising our revenue estimates and putting reserves, making the free cash a stopgap measure for expenses. So I think we've done a good job.
Yes, Judy.
Bob,
I-
you're right, but if you remember back when we were looking to put a vote forth on the budget, there was no plan B. And we in turn reserved our right not to make that recommendation. And then I believe Ann as chair and Maya from the schools and Tony sat down and put together, which I thought was a very good document, and I call it a soft plan B. And there's nothing that requires anything in there. It's just a document that says, this is what, we could do. And some of that, you're right, there was some money thought about. But I mean, what I'm seeing in newspaper ads and so forth, we may be more in trouble than we think we are. And I'm sure Ann will bring this up in a few minutes. There was an article recently, the 25th, mass revenue falls $3 billion short of forecast, and there were a number of pieces to that. I also heard today that there's going to be, I thought I heard $105 billion for back to school reimbursement from the federal government, and hopefully some of that comes through. I hope it comes through in time so we don't have to cut things that we wish we didn't have to. So I guess and you're right, Bob, we did do that, and we had a soft plan B. And but as the time marches on, I'm not as enthusiastic of a soft plan B. I guess we can wait to see when we're in trouble, and then, of course, then we can be reactive rather than proactive.
Any
Thank you.
comment? I at this point, I'm going to kind of sum things up from different discussions I've had with people. And that is that with revenue coming in on a monthly basis, and it's at a lesser amount of money than what we really had expected. And truthfully, the many of the things that we put into the pause program, call it that, at town meeting are things that are very important to us as far as our credit rating is concerned. So we don't want to get into trouble there either, especially since we hopefully will see a new middle school. So I think that's something very important to keep in the back of our mind. The way, maybe Mark, this is another question for you, or maybe Tom, you can both decide who wants to answer it. But with the money coming in the way it is in 1/12 increments, probably at least we'll say up to October. Does that make any difference to us? Do we have significant spending that we need to do between now and then? Will we have enough money to cover those expenses, or do we have to borrow from the Light Department, or or combine go to town meeting, combine a lot of funds and that sort of thing? Do we have to do maybe the rob Peter to pay Paul sort of type of issue? So anybody want to take that? I would appreciate it. Okay, Mr. McQuaid.
So I know people keep saying 1/12 budget, but local aid comes in once a quarter. So, other than what Mark already told us, which is that they're going to fund it at the level of last year, we're not going to actually get the receipts until the end of the quarter. And then, we have plenty of funds. We don't have to borrow anything. So I think we're in good shape. I mean, I think we've taken a lot of good countermeasures.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah,
Yes, Mark.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, your local aid is a very small percentage of, your local aid is $15 million in the $192 million budget. So it's not a big piece of the pie.
Okay.
If you look at our tax revenues, they seem to be coming in okay. We ended fiscal year 2020 at a collection rate of about 98.5%. We normally see that at 99%. Well, in terms of dollars, it was $1 million that we hadn't collected at the end of 2020 versus, 2019, which was at the end of the year, we hadn't collected $500,000. So there's no question that collections are not up to par, but they're not so bad that it's going to impact our cash flow and we're not going to be able to pay our bills.
Okay. Mr. Slater?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the concern I have is just really the unknown. We don't know what we're going to be getting for state budget. We don't know when we're going to get a state budget. We don't know what we're going to get from the federal government, if anything. You get the Republican bill, which is really no additional aid to the states and the cities. You have the Democratic bill, which is a substantial amount of money to the states and the cities. I mean, I suspect that when they finally negotiate, they'll, as it usually does, it'll come in somewhere in between, but we really don't know that. And it's not just for fiscal 20 or fiscal 21 that we have to look to. We have to also look to the out years also, the fiscal 22, 23, et cetera. And what we don't want to do is, if we're flush with cash this year, as an example, we don't want to spend so much cash and spend so much reserves. And if we do have bad years in some of the out years, that we have to make major fundamental changes to our budget, which are going to be particularly painful, and the type of things that nobody really wants to do. So I think the approach we're trying to take still is to be cautious until we know exactly what we have, go slow, in certain type of expenditures and hiring, and see what happens. We may have this discussion in a month when everything we say today may be moot. That'd be great, but we don't know that yet. And until we do know, I think, the people look to us as citizens of Norwood as the FinCom to be their fiscal watchdogs and to look out for, for their finances. And that's, I think, really what we're trying to do, is to propose a cautious approach, keep spending to a minimum, and let's see what happens. And if we have to make changes down the road, either positive or negative, we'll be in a position to do so.
I think that sort of sums up what we'd like to do here this evening. Yes, Mr. Donnelly.
And I agree, Alan's approach to cautiousness is important, but all with a recognition when we are communicating with either school or town management, is the recognition that we don't want to present information from us that would be contrary to the need for the town and schools to do what they need to do during the COVID emergency. So I just want to make sure that whatever communication we are making to the boards or to town management, school management, is that we keep a recognition that they are dealing with a tremendous amount of urgent detail. And so with that, I just want to make sure that if any information coming from us or requests coming up from us isn't interpreted as trying to impede upon their need to respond to any urgencies from the public health emergency that we're in currently.
I don't think thank you, Bob, for saying that, because I'm sure that wasn't intended by what anybody has said here tonight. We do realize that we need to make decisions, financial decisions, and they need to be made constantly and adjusted constantly. But we I think we're asking for caution. So, okay. Kelly, any thoughts? You've been fairly quiet here.
Yeah, well, I agree with what everyone's saying. I agree with, Madam Chair, I agree with you and Judy and Alan and Bob that I think we do need to take a cautious approach. And if there are new things we're looking to implement that don't maintain what we already have, it's probably best to hold off on those. The measures that we took a couple months ago to hold off on certain things like the contribution to OPED and the reserve fund, padding the reserve fund. I also think those are smart things to hold off on. And to be candid, I think we'll probably be holding off on them in September as well. I agree with Alan and Judy said that yes, this year is important and we might not be impacted that much this year because it only impacted part of our budget. But what's more important is that in 2022 and 2023, we don't have to make some sort of draconian cuts because we chose to move forward with things that we don't necessarily need. Not that they're not important. Of course, they're important. We wouldn't do them if they weren't, but that we don't need right now. And we end up shooting ourselves in the foot and having to cut some fundamental programming because we don't hold on to that money. We can always catch up our reserve fund a year from now and double what we put in. Same with OPED, we can do that then. I agree with the cautious approach completely.
Thank you. Judy.
Yeah, I mean, we're walking a very fine line here, and we don't know what the crystal ball is going to tell us. And we do have to be ready to take some immediate action one way or another. I think we're all on the same page. It's just some of us a little more cautious than others. I would rather be proactive than reactive. I think it's easier to do than being reactive and trying to scoop up the pieces. And I think what's important here is that the residents who see this program, or they will see it in the record somewhere, that we, the Finance Commission, is working hard and working with the town side and the school side both to come up with a plan that we all can be successful. And I think this is extremely healthy that we're doing. I was disturbed about that article that I saw on the 25th about the disaster of revenues and so forth. It just makes me uncomfortable. But I will tell you, I firmly believe that I would not want to be the superintendent of schools these days, nor a teacher, nor an administrator. It's going to be a mess, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And I'm hoping we're going to get back at least a giant share of what we spend. And I don't think that anybody thinks that we're going to get away with cutting budgets if we have coronavirus protocols and things we have to put into place. But for the residents of Norwood, I want them to know that the FinCom is, here, we're doing our job. We've been elected to do this. And it is not a negative against anybody. It's just everybody pitch in and everybody have a decision. We respect everybody.
Mr. Donnelly.
So one of the things that I'm wondering if we can do is, and I know that we're actually we're not even at the end of the first month of the fiscal year, but we do have a meeting coming up in August. Is it possible for us to, even if it's a down and dirty data collection, that just gives us an idea of, for the month of July, what is our expense rate? What is our total amount of expenditure? And then is there a way to kind of put together the information or the on revenues that we have been generating or revenues that are available for the month of July? Any kind of analysis that just gives us our cash flow and our revenues are not out of sync greatly. I know that's an accounting mechanism, but I know that it could be difficult to do. But I'm going to throw that out there as if to our finance people, is there a possibility that we can get sort of a 1 month look at revenues gained in July and expenses that we put forward in July?
Ms. McQuaid? 1 minute, Kelly.
I didn't know if Kelly had her hand up.
Why don't you answer Bob, and then I'll call in Kelly. Is that all
Well,
right, Kelly?
every month we send you the budget, which shows the spending versus the budget. So we can do the same thing on the revenue side.
Okay. Yes, Kelly.
So in my opinion, while that's, that's data, I don't necessarily think it's the most useful data. What I think would be more useful to see is our spending by month compared to last year. Because we have different outages at different times where things are paid, and that's just cyclical. So if we look just at expense draw, we might draw down 50% of one fund in June because we do it every year. That's just how the payments work. And if we look at that, we might freak out and be like, look at all these expenses we're paying out. We're way behind, but it's really not relevant because we do it every year. It's expected. So I would rather see it by month, what we made last year in a month, what we spent this year, what we made this year, this month, and then the same on the expense side, so we can compare how we're doing to the previous year. That to me seems like a more meaningful exercise than just a bunch of numbers, how we're doing to a budget for a yearly basis, because there's no point of reference there.
Mr. McQuaid? Is that
Uh,
doable?
I'm not sure we have such a report.
Sounds like a little cut and paste to an Excel spreadsheet. Yes,
I'll see
sir.
what I can do.
Okay. Mrs. Langone?
Yeah, on Munis, don't we have for those who know how to use the reporting system, don't we have some more flexibility than we used to, Tom? Or is there still things in flux on transferring of data and going back
Well, they
to
will have
fiscal?
reports, but municipal government doesn't run by comparing to previous years. It compares to the budget that we have. So I agree with Kelly. That's what I'm used to seeing in the private sector is, this year versus last year. But, the software is not structured that way because that's not how municipal governments work. But it's all about this year's spending versus this year's budget. But I'll see what I can put together.
Okay. Kelly?
At a minimum, Mr. McQuaid, if we could get just I'm sure the system can track how much you've spent in a month in 2020, how much you've spent in a month in 2021. Even if they were two separate reports, you could send them. I could put them together and do analysis on them. That's easy. That would be fairly simple. Take half an hour.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Okay. So folks, we have concerns. It seems, some more so than others. And it's between, and it seems to focus on everybody is having concerns about what is happening between now and October, when we hopefully will have a budget at the state level and we'll know what kind of aid that we're getting for getting children back to school and buses and all of those kinds of things. What we will know in October, what we're going to get reimbursed for by the federal government for the same types of things. And of course, all of the healthcare issues that are coming up. So how do we want to handle this? How do we want to send a missive to our other boards in the town expressing something along those lines? Or do we want to maybe ask for a reconvening of the budget balancing subcommittee, just so that we all continue to have a dialogue between the three major boards? And I think that's the most important thing at this point, is the dialogue between the three major boards. Yes, Mr. Donnelly.
I think I would suggest that, what worked really well when we were going through the preparation for annual town meeting was the subcommittee that was established. That was yourself, Ann, and Alan, to just meet with the school department the town manager as well as the applicable board members to kind of just lay out our concerns and to kind of get the message across, get their perspective in terms of what they are doing now in terms of their spending. I just think that it would be a collaborative approach. I've been on the school website. There are no open positions being advertised. The town right now at least has no current positions. So I think at some level there is a that they, certainly know that they need to be cautious. But I would say that a subcommittee to have face-to-face meetings with our fellow board members and town management is an effective way of addressing the concerns.
Okay. Yes, Kelly.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree with that. I think that that's super effective, but I also thinking having something more formal where other people can participate in it as well. And to make sure that there's a checkpoint for everyone to be able to get the information is also not a bad idea. And I did like, in conjunction with what Bob suggested, I did like your idea of reconvening the budget balancing committee. To me, this situation that we're facing now is very similar to the override, where we had a financial crisis that we had to address. And that committee was really instrumental and critical in pushing forward things that did research and push forward things that address that concern, right? And we're in a similar situation on the opposite side now, right? So I wouldn't see why we already have a mechanism in place for it. Why wouldn't we reenact that to use that to address this, just like we did for the budget and for the override and everything else?
Okay. And one thing that I think that might be getting missed a little bit here is that the reimbursement by the state and the federal government isn't necessarily going to happen this year. Sometimes they're very slow in paying for things. Especially, I believe we've had some issues in the past with reimbursement from the federal government, that it takes a little longer than you'd like to see. It's not like they're going to pay it back in 30 days. So just another thought to add to the whole mess. But okay, did I see another hand? And do we have a motion, or what do you want? How you want to handle this, folks? Yes, Mrs. Lango.
I really like the idea that Bob brought up. We should be talking to each other, and selectmen and school committees should be deeply involved. And while I think the budget balancing committee has served a wonderful purpose, I mean, to have a subcommittee and then a budget balancing, and then we come back and then we share amongst ourselves. I mean, there's so many things going on at once. I would just like to see maybe start out with a subcommittee, maybe of 2 people from the FinCom, 2 from the selectmen, 2 from the school committee, of course, the superintendent, and to get together and communicate. And then we can come back at our meeting and you can report back to the meeting that you've had. I mean, that's one of my things. I mean, we can send a letter off and say, this is what we discussed and we would like to continue the dialogue and so forth. And these are the 2 people we would like to have represent the FinCom, and make it a positive thing. So that's my thought.
Yes, Mr. McQuaid.
So if you have a subcommittee made up of 2 FinCom, 2 selectmen, and 2 school committee, that is the budget balancing committee.
Yeah, I figured that out too. Okay, Alan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think what Bob was referring to was just the sort of ad hoc, unofficial group that we had, that helped develop the slowdown of spending program that we had that ultimately was approved by town meeting. Smaller group, more lower key, but discusses everything and reports back to the major boards. At which point, we can take action. We may or may not have to go with the budget balancing committee at some point. But I think the point is to, if we can simply get together, with some of the appropriate people at the selectman's office, town manager and the school committee, and come up with some ideas and come up with hopefully some agreements, then we can go back to the three main committees and take some action.
Personally, I think we need to have communication with them, and it should be in person and a give and take, and I do believe we need that. Not really too fussy about the how many people, and other than I would strongly suggest that there is at least one member of the board from school committee and the selectmen, and it not be just, and I don't mean that minimally, but just, I don't want to have a dialogue with just the superintendent of schools and the town manager. So the other boards would need to be represented. However, I'm going to leave it up to somebody to make a motion, and we'll go through this and we'll vote on it, and whatever you want. Okay? Okay, Kelly?
I agree. I think the forum is less important, just the participants are important. But I would also like to see it open to anyone from the boards that would like to attend. So even if, that's why I don't want it to be like, if it's the budget balancing committee, those meetings are open, people can go to them. I think it's important for everyone to feel like they're included in the process and can be included, and not necessarily just appointed to those committees. So I don't care how we do it. I would just ask for the meetings to be announced so that anyone who wants to attend from the boards can, so that they can be, feel like they're being part of the process and being kept up on it. That would be my only recommendation. As to
Okay.
how it happens, I don't care.
So basically, any of those of the meetings would have to be open meetings, scheduled meetings with, yeah, open. Yes, gotcha.
That would be my only that would be my only caveat. Other than that, I don't think it matters how it's done, who's on it, or where we do them. I just think it's important that everyone can be included.
Okay, Judy's waving at me.
Yeah, well, I understand where Kelly's coming from, and especially when the decisions are made at those meetings, but there are regular operational meetings, and those majority of FinCom people, majority of selectmen in schools cannot be there because it makes it as a open, an open meeting. But every day there's operational meetings with people to discuss the operations and how are things going. So I think this is something we probably should leave up to, our town manager and selectmen, school committee. And, once you get those open meetings, it just gets to the point where nothing ever happens. So I'm for having, operational meetings. They're limited as far as how many elected officials are there, and virtually there's basically no major decisions made from the boards there.
Okay, anybody, 1 second. Alan and Bob, I haven't heard from either of you on this, and then Kelly, you, okay? Yes. Alan, I'm not hearing you.
Okay, didn't know that you'd called me. I tend to agree with Judy's approach. I think that's the best approach. I think it's the most functional approach, and a very small, select group of people, get together, talk things out, and then report back to their main boards, for formal action to be taken. I think that'll be the most effective use of our time, and in the end will, I think, help all of us, all three boards, come up with a consensus and a product that we can all believe in, and report back to the town accordingly.
Okay. Bob, do you have anything to say?
No, I think Alan said it well.
Okay. Kelly, back to you.
I'm fine. Again, I'm fine with whatever. I would just like to see, a more varied representation of people involved. It seems like it's the same 2 or 3 people from all of the boards that are on these subcommittees. So I just like to see a more varied representation with other people being able to participate in it as well. That's where my feedback's coming from.
Okay, Judy?
Yeah, well, I understand what Kelly's saying, but that's what we're elected for, to do the job. And we do come back to the board. It's an open meeting, and it is a FinCom meeting, a school committee, or whatever. There are ways of expressing concerns and so forth, but that's our job. That's what we've been elected to do. And I don't know if Alan wants to putting you on the spot, Alan. Make a motion.
I would like to make a motion that we contact the town manager and the superintendent of schools. And we asked to set up, again, a very small select group of people to discuss some of these issues and to report back to their respective boards. I don't know how many people we'd like on each, from each committee, whether it's one or two. I think that can be agreed upon between the chairman of the school committee, the chairman of the selectmen, and the chairman of the FinCom. That's
Yeah.
my motion.
Okay, so is your motion to have, okay, let's straighten this motion out a little bit. Do you want to restate it before I say anything?
Nope.
Thanks. So is your motion for us to reach out to the superintendent of schools and the town manager and to the board of selectmen and to the school committee to choose one person from each board plus the superintendent and the town manager to attend a meeting for a discussion of spending?
I would say the budget concerns that we have,
Okay,
which
Am
is
I-
spending, and revenue.
spending and revenue. Okay. So did that encapsulate everything that you wanted to say, Alan?
I think, yes.
Okay. That's your okay.
Yep.
All right. Judy, did you want to say something?
I did, and to say again, this is a discussion, collaboration. It is a meeting, an operational meeting, as most companies have, and they don't invite all their employees in to sit down and talk about it and so forth. I think it's try to get a meeting of the minds and get on the same table, same wavelength. I think we are. It's now just a matter of the mechanics. And these meetings go on all the time. So I'm sure, Kelly, at your place, if you call a meeting with a couple of your key people, you don't invite the whole crew in. So, and again, that's what we're elected for.
Okay. Kelly,
I completely agree with that. That was what was taken from my comments. I apologize for that. That wasn't what I was insinuating. What I would like to see is on our own board, very representation in these subcommittees, because it seems like the same people are in these conversations with the different departments. It's the same for the school committee. It's always Teresa or it's always Maya. I would like to see different people represented in the subcommittee on our own committee to be the lead on this instead of the same two people that are on all the subcommittees. That was the point I was trying to make. So I will make it very bluntly now.
all right. Thank you, Kelly. Judy. Wait,
Well,
Bob,
I would say
minute.
whoever is a chair at the time, they should be definitely on that. As far as the others, it's usually a volunteer kind of a thing. So Kelly, some people don't have the time and some of the expertise that may be needed comparatively speaking to others. So that's why some people seem to show up more frequently than others.
Bob?
Oh, I don't have any comment. Thank you.
Okay, your mic was on. I thought you wanted to say something. Okay, so where are we now? Do we have a second for this motion? Did we have a second?
I'll second Alan's motion. I'll also like to volunteer to be on this committee, please.
Okay. Does somebody want to read back that motion so we're sure what we're voting on here?
I believe the motion is to authorize the Finance Commission Chair to contact the town manager, school superintendent, the chair of the Board of Selectmen, the chair of the school committee, to establish to meet to review revenue and spending levels for FY21. That's the basic. I don't know if we want to add any detail in terms of what kinds of outcome or actions we want from that meeting, but that's, I think, basically the core concept of the meeting.
Thank you. Alan, was that what you intended? Judy?
Yes.
That what you intended?
Mhm.
What Bob just read, was that what you intended for the motion?
Yes.
And I agree with that, although Kelly, I know you have a very busy schedule. And meetings do take place during the day, they take place in the evening. And I think it's wonderful you volunteered for that, because you've got great expertise, but it also involves attendance at the meetings.
I agree, and I've never had a problem attending meetings. I've been at every budget balancing meeting that we've had. So I've
Thank
never had a problem with attending meetings. So I got it. I can manage my schedule. Thank you.
Okay. Judy, was that what Bob read? That's what we're voting on, okay? Is that I can contact these folks and get everybody together and we'll make a decision on who's going and where and why, okay?
Should we have a letter to that effect to give you the authority to go ahead and to approach that? Like it's a board decision here. Okay, you can just go and say that it's in the record that the board voted for it.
Do you want me to write a letter? Do you want a email to come from me? Do you want, how do you want to do this?
Well,
Can it
since
just
it's an
be an email?
operational type, since it's an operational type and the standard kind of operating practice, just verbally, I mean, it's in the minutes, that's the board's vote.
Okay. Mr. McQuaid, did I see your hand up?
Well, I guess I'm not clear on this vote. Is the FinCom authorizing the chair of the FinCom to have as many or as few people as she wants? That's fine with me. I'm just, is that the clarification? Because seems to me there was a lot of discussion about maybe one, maybe two, whatever. So I just
I
want to
would
make,
leave it up to Ann. I would leave it up to Ann and the other chairs to decide if it's 1, 2, 3, 18, however many it is, that's up to them.
Okay.
okay.
Bob, was that how the,
I'm sorry, Ann. Yeah, I think, Ann, in your communication with the Board of Selectmen, with Bill and with Teresa, certainly you can outline the request and tell them that, that they can appoint whomever they feel is best suited for this exercise and leave it to their discretion as to who from their committee should be part of it.
okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So said, we're voting on the motion as read by Bob, as voted by, as Alan and Judy presented it, okay? So Judith, your vote.
Are you waiting for me?
Yes.
Yes, I vote yes.
Okay, Kelly,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
and I vote yes also. And I want to make a comment. It's this is a cautionary thing that we're trying to do. I think that might be a good way to put it. And it in no means are we implying that people are overspending their budgets or that they're spending recklessly or anything like that, because that is not the case. Everyone knows the rules and they follow the rules and they do a great job. But it's just that we want to make sure that there's a level of communication that's happening between all the boards and all the decision makers. Does that work for everybody?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, it does.
All righty,
Yes.
thank you. So, do we have any other business, anything to report, anything that, Mr. Slater? You're the busy one this summer. What's going on?
Just very briefly, and contrary to my nature, I will be brief. We're having a meeting of the Middle School Building Committee on Wednesday, which we televised by NCM. I believe it's 5 o'clock. The purpose is to introduce Compass Management, who is our new OPM for the Coakley Middle School project, and then to simply discuss further steps.
Okay, great. Judith? Do you have
Yeah, I
anything?
just have one more thing. I'd like to thank Mark for attending our meetings. It's very nice to have you here and your information. Thank you very much.
Okay, Kelly?
All good.
Okay. Mr. Donnelly?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, Mr. McQuaid, anything you want to add?
No, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Good, anything you'd like to add? All right. So I guess I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second,
Second.
All in favor, Judy?
yes.
Kelly?
Hi.
Yes? Are you? Oh,
Yes. Yes.
You have a visitor.
Sorry. I had a child pop in. Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
and I'm a yes also. Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening and sharing your concerns and your thoughts about what is happening. And we'll see what we can do to get our fellow board members together. And I, of course, will let you all know when and what is going on and how the decision is being made. And I will do it via email. Okay?